Last week you created hand-drawn frame-by-frame animation. I mean, it was only dots, but you had to draw every single frame. This week what we're going to be doing is we're going to create keyframe animation. Now, in order to do that, you have to animate objects. You can't animate a drawing. You can't set a keyframe of a position of a drawing and then in another frame make another keyframe, except for shape keys. But minus those, for the most part, when you're doing the keyframing, you're going to need objects. So the primary way that we create objects inside of Adobe Animate are symbols. Symbols are also the way that we interact with objects using code. Because what it allows it to do is it will give it transform, so position, rotation, and scale. It'll have all those attributes, as well as give it a unique name and things such as that. Okay, so I just wanted to cover basically what symbols are so that you get an idea of how they function. Okay, so generally speaking, when we look at symbols, this is kind of an example that I made. These are most of what you will see. So the first one is a movie clip. Basically, you can have a symbol. It will be a drawing. And then inside of it, you can have frames itself. So as an example, I'm just going to open up Animate. So I can just create a shape, right? So this is just a shape like you did before. All right, we haven't really covered how to really draw per se, but there's the shape. Okay, so I take that. I'm just going to hit F8 to make it into a symbol. I'm going to make a movie clip. We'll just call it movie clip. Okay. Now, when you make a symbol, what's nice about it is that now it becomes an object, and you can see now it has all this position. I can give it a unique name. It has a name itself called movie clip. It also will show up in the library, so I can have multiples of them. And if I change one, the other ones will also inherit it. Okay, so it's like instancing, if you're familiar with that term. Okay, so what happens to one on the inside will happen also to the others. All right, and that goes for all symbols that you make, not just movie clips themselves. However, when I go inside the movie clip, you will see it has its own frames inside of it. So if I were to, no, let's not do that one. Let's do this. If I were to go here and then I go like this, and then I go here and then I go like this. This is a bad example, but just so you get an idea, like this. When I go out, you won't be able to see it previewed here. So even if I extend this and I were to play it, you're going to see that you don't necessarily see it. However, if I go to preview it, you will see the animation right here. Okay. So basically inside of that, there are, it has its own timeline that you can then put keys and all sorts of interesting things. Okay. And then you can actually nest symbols inside of symbols. So this, just like the stage itself, this, I can have multiple layers, I can have multiple objects, so you can nest and nest and nest and make something very complicated with all these different cogs spinning and all sorts of interesting things. So that is the movie clip. Most of the time, that's the one we're going to be using, just because it's the most robust. Okay, so the next style would be the button. So the button just has states. And so an example here, so an example of a movie clip is like when I click on this, see how he runs, right? So it's a movie clip. The movie clip starts playing when I hit the button, and then it'll stop playing when I tell it to stop playing. But a button works like a button you would have inside of web design, where it will have a default state, a hover state, and a click state. Okay, and then you can use that in order to make things happen, right? So you can have event listeners and such. And just again, as an example, real quick, let's go back out to the scene. Let me just do a circle so it looks a little bit different. Okay. I can take this, I can hit F8 to make a function, or you just go to modify, convert to symbol, and then we choose button. I'll just say button. Okay. When I go open this one, you're going to see its timeline looks different. Okay, so F6, F6, and F6. Basically, it has an up position, which is its default state, an over position, that's the hover, a down position, which is when I push it down, and then the hit is the hitbox, basically. So if I make the graphic just the hit, then it will be the graphic itself. But for some reason, I want it to be over here, which would be weird because the graphic's here. I'd have to hover over here and then you would see the different states. So this is just like what you want it to be. Now, if you don't include any there, like if I just remove this frame, where are you? Clear keyframe. It will just make the graphic itself be that. So you don't usually have to do hit unless you need to make something specifically different. So that's what a button is. I'm not going to go much farther into that. That should hopefully make sense. Okay. Now, the next one is a graphic. So a graphic can also hold animation, but it's dependent on the main timeline. So what that means is this. I'll show you. Notice that these aren't animated, right? I'm just going to go ahead and delete these symbols. And we're going to make, do I have another shape? Do a polystar. Okay. All right. So I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go ahead and make this into a symbol again. This time we're going to choose graphic. Okay. So if you're just doing a graphic, you don't want it to move or anything, that's a good one to use. But I'm going to go in here and you'll see it actually has a timeline, but it's slightly different. So I'm just going to do a real quick, animation, we'll say. Okay. This is the best animation you've ever seen in your life. Just so you get the idea. All right. Great. Okay. So it just does this. Now, what you're going to notice is different from this is that it is actually dependent on the timeline. See how when I'm in here, it previews here. So even though it has frames like in here, this cannot run on its own. So it will only run as long as this is running, which is different than a movie clip, where a movie clip, I could be stuck on frame 1. Like, let's say we're just waiting and I have the game paused or something. If this was a movie clip, it would keep playing even if it was on frame 1. This will stop on frame 1. It only plays with the timeline. It has the advantage of playing in, like, previewing while you are, in the on the stage view, in the scene view here. But that's sort of what the difference is. So those are kind of the 3 main symbols. Like I said, most of them will be using movie clip just because it's a little bit more robust than the symbol. Although the symbol actually can do certain things that the movie clip can't. But anyway, that's just our way of making interactable objects so that we can key them, we can add code to them, things like that, right? So kind of like object-oriented programming, those are going to be our objects. Now, you can actually animate other non-symbol objects and do some things with other non-symbol objects, such as like text, images that you bring in, audio, because it will treat those as objects as well. They will actually show up in the library as well. So you can see like the things I made here, they all showed up. So when you bring audio in or graphics and stuff, those will actually show up also in the library. So those can also have unique names and things as well. It's best to make them symbols though, just because it's a little bit cleaner. But just be aware that there are some other ones that you might deal with. I made another video here kind of also explaining it. I don't remember when I made this, so if my explanation didn't make as much sense now, maybe this one will be better. But other than that, that's the rough idea of what symbols are inside of